Radio James. James felt so tired after his long run that a diesel shunter pushed him through the big yard of York Station to the National Railway Museum's roundhouse. He was far too sleepy to take in his surroundings as the diesel shunted him into the shed and scuttled away. With a loud yawn, James closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. "You must be James. Welcome to the roundhouse." James awoke with a start and looked around. Daylight was just seeping into the shed. The roundhouse was full of engines of every size, colour and shape. James finally understood Thomas's thrill at going to the Great Railway Show before. There was a large green engine sitting next to him, who smiled broadly. "Hello, you must be Sodor's engine, James." You know my name?" asked James, fighting off a yawn. "Certainly," replied the engine. "I heard all about your extravagant entrance. Sir Topham Hatt must be very proud of his engines." James liked the engine immediately, who introduced himself as Defiant, representative of the Great Western Railway. Defiant then introduced James to the other engines present. "This engine," he said, looking towards an apple-green engine, "is the London North Eastern representative. Those two, fast asleep over there, are Winston Churchill and Princess Elizabeth. They're the Southern Railway and London Midland and Scottish representatives. Which leaves you," Defiant said, smiling, "as the Sudrian representative. How was the journey to York?" James and Defiant chatted on throughout the early morning like old friends. James told him all about Sodor, and Defiant entertained James with his time at London Paddington. James was surprised to hear the name Montague used a few times. "Did he used to waddle?" James asked. Defiant laughed. "He did indeed. He was a hard-working tank engine, that Montague," he recalled. "A bit headstrong and a stickler for the rules. You didn't want to get on the wrong side of Montague. He'd shut you out the shed at night if you did." James pretended to laugh, crossly remembering Percy and Duck's protests all those years ago. "What was it like to live through the war?" "I call it luck, really. It was a devastating time, though. It took a lot to restore the railways back to their best. I was one of a few lucky engines to survive," Defiant said sadly. James wanted to know more, but very soon the shed was filling up with visitors, excited to meet the famous survivors of the terrible war. James was still tired from his overnight journey and decided to go back to sleep. He woke again a few hours later. The diesel shunter had moved him from the roundhouse to the yard, where he was being fired up by his crew. As he looked towards the station, he was met with an odd surprise. The entire building had undergone a rapid change. Sandbags lined the platform, and odd posters had been pasted up onto the walls, with slogans that read, "Saucepans for Spitfires," and "Look out in the blackout." The station was full of people wearing queer-looking clothes. The majority of them were elderly gentlemen in military uniforms, talking excitedly. "Seems as the Memorial Week is underway," commented his crew. James noticed a crowd growing larger and larger on the platform, and he smiled to himself. "Once I appear," he thought, "they're bound to come flying over. I am a famous engine after all." With that, James puffed proudly towards the station. But in spite of the crowd's size, the passengers took no notice. James felt exasperated. "Why is nobody paying attention to me?" he fumed. "I'm one of the Fat Controller's engines. Gordon was given a welcome when he came before." Then an important-looking man approached. "Sorry, but you'll have to move," he told James's crew. "We're waiting to interview Defiant for railway hour. You're interfering with the radio waves." James looked over to see a radio reporter and his crew standing by, microphone in hand. Reluctantly, he shunted himself to a siding out of the way, seething in rage. "How dare they, telling me to move? I'm just as famous as Gordon. Why doesn't anyone notice me?" The fireman chuckled. "You know what they say about celebrities. The moment they're taken out the spotlight, they realise what they're missing." Soon, Defiant backed into the station, welcomed by a tremendous cheer from the passengers. James grumbled darkly, blowing hot ashes from his firebox. The station master came over some time later. "I'm sorry they made you wait, but we need your help. Would you please double-head a train with Defiant? It's a special for the veterans in the wireless company." This made James feel better. If he was going to be double-heading with Defiant, then at least they'll come to admire him as well as the famous old engine. But James found, to his displeasure, they'd arranged Defiant to head the train, leaving James stuck between him and the coaches, blotted from view. Worse still, when the war veterans came to admire Defiant, none of them came near James at all. "They all think I'm just another engine," he thought crossly. "Well, let them wait. I'll show 'em." The guard blew his whistle, and they were off. Defiant had warned James that his parts were worn, so James had to provide most of the work. He didn't mind at all. His thoughts were elsewhere. As the train moved out, James spotted the wireless crew from before. They were setting up for another report beside the line, and waved as the train went past. Within an instant, an idea came to James. "I'll do it when we come back," he thought. The veterans had a most memorable day. They spent the afternoon watching the flybys as a way of opening the event, and were looking forward to a nice dinner back at York. James behaved for the rest of the journey, but couldn't help hurrying Defiant a little. It wouldn't be long now. Soon, York Station came into view, and sure enough, the wireless crew were there waiting, their equipment at the ready. James saw them and braced himself. The reporter turned to his crew. "All right, everyone, after 3. 1, 2, 3. He went to speak into the microphone to broadcast his report, when the entire yard was suddenly filled with the ear-splitting sound of a high-toned whistle. The reporter dropped his microphone in surprise and forgot they were still on the air. James snorted past, puffing thick blasts of smoke and steam. The noise was deafening as they pulled in. The veterans fled from the train as fast as their walking sticks would take them. The commotion ended when the fat controller came storming onto the platform. James didn't feel any pride then. He was spoken severely to, and was threatened to be sent home if he misbehaved again. "It serves them right for ignoring me," James fumed as he skulked to the big shed. The next morning, his driver and fireman came running in with a copy of the newspaper. "James!" they called excitedly. "Look at this!" James looked down in surprise at the headline. "Famous engine interrupts radio broadcast." "You won't believe it," chuckled the fireman, "but your little tantrum was heard across the entire city. Now the whole of York knows you're here." "They do?" asked James, speechless. "They've been ignoring me since my arrival. They thought I was just another engine." "An old London journalist heard it all on the wireless," explained the driver. "He recognised your whistle straight away and told the press everything. It has been a while since we've come to England, so they might have just forgotten. Although," he added, "you could have been a little more discreet." James chuckled. He was glad to have been noticed, but not how he had intended.